I'm Kara. Welcome to Glazing with Amaco. And I'm going to be talking today about how to glaze things that have holes in them, like this berry bowl. I know it's dark, so it's hard to see, but it does have holes in it so that you can rinse produce and the produce doesn't go through. So one of the tricks is that a lot of times when glazing, especially if you have small openings or thick glazes, the glaze will clog up the holes. So I'm going to talk about that today. And before I get too far into this, I also wanted to talk about the glazing here that I have. So hang on a moment. This is Obsidian Celadon, that's C1 Obsidian, inside and out, with a band of PC57 Smoky Merlot around the top edge. Really lovely. Now I wanted to talk about something that comes up pretty regularly with using the Celadons. Let me see if I can zoom in here. And you can see that there are, it's hard to tell, let's see if I can find the reflection. There are what appears to be pinholes in the Obsidian Celadon. And I get this comment pretty regularly, people saying, I'm always getting these pinholes. They're not actually pinholes. So what they are is that the Celadons, and Obsidian in particular, have a very high surface tension. So if there's any irregularities in the surface of the clay, and this is a smooth white stoneware, this is 11M A-Mix, Amaco's A-Mix clay, and it does not have grog in it, so it's not the grog, but this is where I trimmed, and so there are inconsistencies in the surface. So what I have two options. Before I bisque fire, I like to go over things with a rubber rib and kind of smooth out the clay body and make sure that there's no surface inconsistencies. You can do that when it's leather hard. Now, pardon me, it can be tricky to do something about it once it's bisque, but what I do when glazing is use a watered down mixture of the glaze, just a little bit of glaze with a little bit of water in a separate container so that I'm not watering down my main glaze. And I brush that on and get that into those holes so it kind of floats it in. Another option is after the glaze is dry to rub the glaze, and that kind of pushes the dry glaze in. And you can refire these. It'll work just fine if you get some glaze into those spots and refire it to cone 5. But the glaze doesn't really pinhole. It just is so stiff that it does not run into small openings in the bowl. So let me see. Do we have questions? I see Stegoramic said test. Yes, I see you. So what I do have today is another berry bowl that I made, lots of holes. Again, it's the same clay, it's the 11M. And I did want to talk about the things you can do to make holes. You want to remember, of course, you know that clay shrinks. The holes will shrink too. So there are a couple different things you can use that work really well. A lot of people really love to use a drill bit. Drill bits work really well. You just have to go slow and be very patient. Just do it by hand. You don't need to have it attached to a drill. Just use the bit by hand to go through the clay. Just twist as you go, just like a drill. So those work really well. You can also get a hole maker that has a little plunger. This helps to get the clay to pop back out. And you just go in through the clay and then pop out the little plug that comes out. So those are two ways of making holes. And you want to make sure to make them not too large, but not too small. You want to make the holes when the clay is leather hard. If it's too dry, you may run the risk of having cracking. And if you do it when it's too wet, you can deform things and kind of make it messy. So today's glazing, we're using C22 Fog for our base, and then I'm going to use PC46 Lustrous Jade over it. So just glaze the way you would normally glaze any kind of bowl. Of course, I'm going to brush, and I want to make sure that I do get glaze on the insides of the holes, of course. So you don't want it to be raw inside there, but you see how the glaze, especially the Celadons, they have such a high surface tension, they do like to get into those holes and just stay there. And it can be difficult to make a really smooth application of glaze when you're trying to get it into the openings. Don't worry about it. So Heather is asking, why do colors appear brighter on top of obsidian? And I don't know. I think that some of it is just the stiffness of the Celadons, but lots of colors are much brighter on top of Celadons. And it is a wonderful thing how colors seem to be much richer on top of obsidian. I don't think they're necessarily brighter, but they definitely have a richness that is really quite remarkable. So these ridges at the top, this is where I'm going to put the Lustrous Jade and get some textural and contrast interest going on. Fog is one of my favorite Celadons. Such a lovely, subtle color. Kind of gray, kind of blue. So at this stage, my interest is in making sure I get glaze into the holes, not getting glaze out of the holes. But if you've ever made a berry bowl, you have probably had the experience of having at least one or more of the holes glaze shut. And boy, it's annoying when you have something that you meant to have holes in it and it doesn't. You thought it was going to have holes in it. So there's my first coat of fog. I still see some little spots that I didn't get the glaze all the way in. So I'll try to get glaze into those. Sometimes I use a smaller brush, but I don't think I don't have a smaller brush here in the studio, in the video studio today. David offered to get me a small brush, and I'm like, no, that's okay. I will be just fine. So you can see how some of the glaze is even like leaking out the other side. That's fine. No problem. I'm going to put a second coat on the outside. This time I'm working more towards getting an even coat, since I have made sure to get glaze inside the holes. I think I'm seeing all the comments. Have there been any comments coming in that I have not seen or have not responded to?
There have not.
Okay. Thank you, David.
And looks like cone 5-6 is just redirecting to American Art Clay Company.
Weird. Well, if I have to repost the video from YouTube later, then we will do that. Well, I'm going to go with the 2 coats of fog here. I will do a 3rd coat on the inside, but I am going to show you next my trick for, sorry, I'm going to stand up out of frame for a moment here. Got a hair. That's what happens when I have long hair. I'm shedding. Don't worry, it'll fire out. So after I get this coat on the inside, I'm going to show you my method for getting the glaze out of the holes. Or should I say excess glaze, because I do want to have glaze in the holes. I just don't want to have so much that it seals the hole shut. So I use a couple different options. I have used pipe cleaners in the past. You can do pipe cleaners. Those work pretty well. But my favorite method is to just use a standard needle tool. I think I'm going to have to wait until this dries just a little bit more because I can't pick it up just yet. So, sorry.
Now would be a great time for some questions.
Now would be a great time for some questions. Does anyone have questions about making berry bowls? I mean, basically it's a small bowl. It can be cereal size to kind of like medium size bowl, soup bowl size. You don't want it to be too big or it's just a colander, but you can add handles and just make enough holes in the bottom and make a tall enough foot so that it can drain easily. So you can put it in your sink, but it still looks nice. You can also make a little plate for it so that you can serve it without having to dry off everything. You can just serve it directly in its bowl. Let's see. I'm going to go with that. So what I do is I use my needle tool to actually kind of excavate almost all the glaze. You may, if you have a particularly runny glaze, you may need to test this technique. This works really well with the Celadons because they're stiff, but you see how it wants to stay in that hole? You may be able to see how it does not want to come out. I'm really having to coax it and take a lot of glaze. But even just the small amount of glaze that's left, so I'm taking most of it out. You don't want to leave very much glaze in the hole because when it melts, it will try to fill it up again. And although sometimes that's a really beautiful effect, it does make it difficult to drain your berries. Another technique that some people like to use is to wax the holes. I don't wax the holes because I do want to have glaze in there. I just don't want very much. I just want a minimal amount. And of course this works for if you have a strainer on a teapot, if you're making pour overs or tea infusers. or lanterns, anything that has holes in it, this is the best way to make sure that you're not getting sealed up holes. I know it seems awfully basic to say this, but so I would love to hear from everybody. What are some more topics you would like me to cover? So I do have plans to do some more glazing discussions of Celadons, velvets, potter's choice. But are there particular glaze questions that you have for me? And that I could cover in future videos. And I will be starting a Monday every other week. So on weeks that I'm not doing the Tuesday glazing, I'll be doing a Monday morning stream in the Amaco 5-6 glaze group. It'll be a casual thing. I'm just going to be bringing in whatever projects I'm working on and glaze them. So you'll see kind of a variety of things, and it won't have any particular plan ahead of time. But I'd love to hear if you have issues or questions that I can help you out with in our Tuesday feeds. You can comment on the stream now or later if you have things that you would like covered. What are your biggest difficulties with glazing, your biggest questions with glazing that you need feedback on? I think that one of the biggest problems most of us have with glazing is how it doesn't look the same. You know, we get into clay because it's such a direct material. You know, you're really just getting right into it and getting your hands in, and there's nothing between you and the clay. And then you get to glazing, and not only is there something between you and the material and your clay, but you also don't have any way of seeing it as it develops, because it happens in the kiln where we can't really make changes on the fly. And then it's done. And you're like, wait, that's not what I had in mind. You can see how the Celadons really like to fill in those large openings, which is ironic since they don't like to fill in small openings. But they will definitely seal up holes if you're not careful. So this is time consuming, but I will bring this back next week. You know what I haven't shown you yet is last session's June bug. So 2 weeks ago, I glazed a vase with June bug, and I fired it last night. This was cone 5 with a 20-minute hold, so it went to cone 6. Let's see if I can do a zoom. And you may be able to see it did not develop crystals, but it is a beautiful iridescent green, and it has kind of a rainbow as it gets thinner towards the bottom. Very pretty. Very, very pretty. I know, difficult to see. Lighting is always a challenge. Let me get back to this, and Nancy asked about how far down with the second glaze, how far down will I go to minimize dripping? Well, I am only going to go down to about here. So I won't go to where the holes are. And I do that to avoid any dripping, even though most of these combinations don't drip excessively. I want to make sure that I don't have any dripping. So I am going to, pardon me, get my sponge. I am going to gently sponge the inside where it got thick from my poking through from the other side. I'll go back and clean that up when it's dry. And now I'm going to do the outside. So Nancy, you will see exactly how far down I go. So this is Lustrous Jade, PC46, Lustrous Jade. And I'm going to apply it from just below the rim to just below that textured band. And Lustrous Jade is not particularly runny. It's a little bit runny. For those of you who really like textured turquoise, Lustrous Jade is related. It's not the same. It's a lot more green. It's a little bit, it's a bit more opaque, but it has a lot of similarities to textured turquoise, and it will give some of the same kind of effects when layered. So I just apply it that far down. I'll let that little blob hang out there, and I accidentally touched it to the table. And I'll do another coat, another thick coat, and then I'm going to do one more coat on the inside for the fog. I'll do that now. I do want to make sure that I don't contaminate my glaze jars, so I won't touch the wet glaze. And I will go one more time, and just after everything is completely dry, I will go back and make sure that all of those holes are completely open. Susan says, "Hi, Kara." Hi. There we go. So I'll have this back when we're back in 2 weeks, and I forget off the top of my head what our topic is in 2 weeks, but I hope that you will join me again, and we will have more glazing with Amaco. I really appreciate you coming and visiting with me, and if you have any more questions, you can comment below. You can message me on Facebook at Amaco Brent, and you can also reach me through our website. Have a great Tuesday, wow, and if you make berry bowls, I would love to have you share the photos. So we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.